Hi, in this video we're going to have a look at quite an important section, which is updating the system defaults. So to do this, we click up in the menu. We need to go into system settings. If you don't have access to this, contact the person who set up the account. And then we go down to system defaults. So some fundamental stuff that you might want to update here, i.e. your company name, your address, your telephone number, your website details, and also your primary email. So if you send an email to a customer or an invoice, then potentially you might want to use your own email address. So we can save that, and it'll always take you back to the home screen. So we can go into system defaults again, and remember to click on edit. And then let's scroll down through some of the other sections, some really important things in here. The first one we mentioned up here, the primary email address. So in order to link that into your email system, so we click on here and we can enable this. So it puts in your details in here. So you'll need to enter in your password, and you'll also need to select, you need to tell it who is managing your emails. So if it's Hotmail, or it could be Gmail or Apple or Microsoft 365 or whatever. There's also a custom option where you can actually input your email host and your email port. So if you speak to your whoever sets up your emails, this is the same sort of information that you would need if you're going to have your emails appearing on your phone. So it's easy enough to get. Once you've entered in this information, remember just to click on test local email, and that will try and simulate, it'll try and log in and send an email using your email account. A couple of other things in here just to watch out for. Sometimes, for example, if you use Gmail, then or some of the other email accounts, you actually have to log into that email account and let it use third-party apps. Yeah. So what happens is, once this is configured and you send out an estimate or an invoice, it actually logs in and uses your email account to send the information. So A, the customer recognizes it, which is good, but also B, it'll keep a copy of that email in your sent items as proof that you sent it. Another nice feature in here is if you don't want to use your email, you can actually, if you don't turn on use on mobile, it'll pick up the default email account that's configured on your mobile. So if you're using your mobile app and this isn't enabled, whichever is the primary email account on your mobile, and you send out an estimate or an invoice using the mobile app, it'll use the email account that's already on your phone. But you can override it by simply clicking on this, at which point it'll use this email account. Okay, so it's a lot of advanced but very important options in here. Okay. So I'll just disable that for now. Sales tax settings, if you click in here, in the demos, when we demoed it, we didn't really turn this on, but if you want that to appear, you can turn it on here. Then you've got the sales tax label, and that tends to vary in different countries. So in the UK it's called value-added tax, some other places just called sales tax, so we can just type that in, and we can input a default rate. A couple of important things: if we are going to do sales tax and charge people, most countries require you to input or to have the sales tax reference at the bottom of your invoice. So you can type that in and it'll automatically appear on your invoice. This little feature is really applicable to the UK. So if you enable this, then a couple of things will happen. A new field will appear against contacts, and you'll need to select is it the customer in the UK, Europe, or in the rest of the world. And also when you input your expenses, you'll select which region the expense was incurred. And all of that's to do with submitting your quarterly VAT returns. Estimate settings. Earlier when we generated an estimate, it pulled through the terms and conditions, and this is where you can update those. Okay, so this means once you've updated this and you go to do an estimate, then it'll automatically populate the latest copy. This information will pull this through. We also mentioned when we looked at estimates how you could automatically send an email. Well, this is where you can configure it. So this is, it'll pop in the company name, and it'll also input the sales proposal description in the email subject. And then it'll say, "Dear Mr. Smith," or whatever, "please find attached an estimate for the work that you require." Once again, you can customize all this text. And if you could review it and respond to me at this email account, so it'll pop in your email account. And then it pops in all of your details, yours sincerely, your company name, your address, your telephone number and stuff. So it saves you having to type all of this in. There is also an option when you send out an estimate or an invoice. Do you want to customize this? So if it's someone that you really know, or if you needed an answer straight away, you also have an opportunity to customize this email before you press the send button. Okay, what are the sections? We have a similar thing on invoicing. So you got your invoice terms, notes, email, email template. There are other settings on the invoicing. So do you want the ability to generate an invoice against an estimate, against a project, or against a contact? So some additional, especially in a multi-user environment, that could be quite useful. Draft text. So some people change this to pro forma. So sometimes people enter in like a temporary invoice and they send it out to the customer labeled up as a pro forma. So it's not a proper invoice, hasn't been finalized, but it's like it's another type of estimate really. But some people opt to do that. You can also change your invoice numbering. So if you're replacing an existing system and you're currently up at invoice 375, you can just start at 378 and it'll continue on. You can input your default terms and conditions. Sometimes in larger companies, they do require you to quote a purchase order. So you have to get authorization and they'll give you a purchase order and then you have to quote that on an invoice. Once again, you can enable that or disable it. Most small companies is not applicable to them. And there's other options here which we'll cover in a more advanced video. So if we scroll on down, we can configure electronic payments. This is really powerful. This is where you can connect it to Stripe and a little blue button will appear on your invoices and customers can click on it, enter in the credit card details, and Stripe will manage all of that process for you. They'll take the payments and they'll pay it directly into your bank account. Really useful thing here is that you can configure Stripe then to pay the money into your account per transaction. You can do it daily, you can do it weekly, you can do it monthly. So it's quite interesting and people can get quite clever the way they do this, especially if you've got a lot of large transactions or large volume of transactions. We can also enable integration. This enables integration options to other systems. You can say whether you want the expense approval process enabled, and you can also go in and do some very clever things with the diary. So when you enter in a note, do you want to lock it, never lock it? Do you want to lock it immediately as soon as it goes in? Or probably if you're using if you've got multiple staff and they're entering notes against customers, sometimes it's better just to lock it after one day. So this means that people can't change the history. So if I entered in a note saying the customer's really happy, then I couldn't go back in and change it after one day. But Locking immediately is not a good idea because that means if someone made a typo or if they changed their mind and they thought, oh, I forgot to update something, it means they could do it, but locking after 1 day is quite clever. The same with reminders and the same with updating documents. This is a really powerful feature of the confirm option. So if you enable this, instead of just typing stuff into your diary, so let's say I needed to update my insurance policy next Monday, then if I forget to do it, a little alarm comes up here, and I find that really useful. It does mean as you do things, you have to tick them off as having been completed, but it's a really powerful option. And that's powerful whether you've got multiple staff in your company or even just for yourself. It just means that you never forget things. So that's just an idea of the system defaults. A really important concept. If I didn't have estimating enabled or invoicing enabled or expense management, those sections will not appear in the system defaults. So only the sections relevant to the features that you've enabled appear in this section. So if I enabled project management, then a project management section would appear. If I enabled online trading would appear in here, and so on. So this is the main engine room of the app. This is where you change how the app works, and it makes that change across the board for all users. And once you tend to set it up and change it at the start, you tend not to go in here thereafter. Yeah, it tends to be only a one-off exercise. And once again, we're more than happy to help you to configure this because it is quite an important part of the app. Okay, that concludes updating the system defaults.